I never thought the day would come when my own blood, my only son, would betray me in the most heartless way possible. They say pain teaches you who truly stands by your side, but I learned that lesson lying on a cold hospital bed fighting for my life while my son was busy selling the one thing I cherished most. Our family's beach house. That house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was memories. It was where my late wife, Eleanor, and I spent endless summer nights listening to the waves crash against the shore. It was where our boy, Daniel, took his first wobbly steps on the warm sand, his laughter echoing in the salty air. It was where I promised her I'd keep our family together, no matter what. But when you give someone everything, they sometimes start to believe they're entitled to it. I had spent my life building a small fortune from scratch, through hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices my son never saw. I gave him a life of comfort, foolishly thinking that love alone could teach him the value of gratitude. But I was wrong. Greed has a way of poisoning even the purest of hearts. When I first felt that sharp, crushing pain in my chest, it wasn't fear of dying that hit me, it was regret. Regret for how much I had given to a son who'd never learned the value of anything. The doctors called it a major heart attack. I called it a wake-up call. My body was failing, and Daniel was the only family I had left. So I trusted him blindly. I shouldn't have. The morning I was admitted, Daniel stood beside my hospital bed, his face a perfect mask of concern. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, gripping my hand with a firmness that felt almost possessive. "I'll take care of everything while you recover. The house, the business, all of it. Just focused on getting better." I nodded weakly, not realizing those words would soon become a curse. The surgery was risky. I signed the documents, transferring temporary power of attorney to him, Sophie. I now wish I had never done and let the doctors wheel me away. While I lay unconscious and vulnerable, my heart literally in the hands of strangers, my son made his move. Greed doesn't wait for the right time, it strikes the moment your back is turned. I didn't find out immediately. No, betrayal rarely screams, it whispers. It came to me through a quiet voice, a nurse named Clara. She had worked for me years ago, a kind woman I had helped through a tough time. Fate, it seems, had brought her back into my life. One night, while checking my vitals, she leaned in close and said softly, "Mr. Walker, I don't want to worry you, but I thought you should know. I saw your son in the cafeteria with a man from a real estate office. I overheard them talking about a quick sale, something about a beach property." My heart monitor beeped faster. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, but deep down I knew it wasn't. When the people you love most betray you, denial becomes your only oxygen. I waited. I didn't confront him. I needed to be sure. 2 weeks later, on the day I was discharged, the final proof arrived. Daniel, the son who had promised to take care of everything, didn't even show up to drive me home. Instead, it was Clara who volunteered. She had been by my side every day, a steady presence when my own family was absent. "Let me take you, Mr. Walker," she said gently. "Your son called, said he was tied up in a meeting." A meeting. I knew exactly what kind of meeting. As we drove away from the hospital, I asked her to take a detour past the beach house. As we turned onto the familiar coastal road, my heart sank. A large sold sign was staked into the front lawn, a vulgar red slash across my life's memories. It was a dagger to the heart, more painful than any surgeon's scalpel. I didn't react. I didn't shout, he just stared, a cold resolve settling over me. In that moment, something inside me hardened. He didn't know, I heard the whispers. He didn't know Clara was my friend, and he certainly didn't know. I had one last card left to play. You see, what my son didn't realize was that the beach house wasn't the only property I owned in my late wife's. The real fortune, a one his greedy hands could never reach, was hidden away, legally protected and tied to a name he'd long forgotten. Eleanor's maiden name, and that secret would soon become the weapon that would tear his hollow pride apart. As I recovered, weaker in body but stronger in resolve, I didn't call him. I didn't rush to my main house. I stayed with Clara and her family, letting Daniel believe I was still frail and oblivious. I simply watched from a distance. I watched as he flaunted his newfound wealth, the money from my house, my memories. He bought a flashy new car, hosted lavish parties, and boasted to his friends as if life had finally rewarded his ambition, not his treachery. He thought he was free. He thought he had won, but his freedom was built on a lie, and that lie was about to crumble. People think revenge is a loud, fiery explosion. It's not. True revenge is quiet. It's patient. It waits for the perfect moment, when the one who wronged you is standing at the peak of their arrogance, believing they've gotten away with it all. And then, it strikes, not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating truth that leaves nothing but regret in its wake. My moment came a month later. I had regained my strength. I arranged a meeting with my lawyer, the same one who had helped me set up the trusts in Eleanor's name years ago. Then I called Daniel. "Son," I said, my voice calm and steady, "it's time we talked. Meet me at the lawyer's office tomorrow at 10. The arrogance in his voice was sickening. "Sure, Dad. Whatever you need." He probably thought I was going to officially hand over the rest of my estate. The fool. The next morning, he strode into the conference room with a confident smirk. He saw me, looking healthier than he expected, and his smile faltered for just a second. "Dad, you're looking better," he said, feigning surprise. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Sit down, Daniel." My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, placed a stack of documents on the table. "What's all this?" Daniel asked, his eyes darting between me and the papers. "This," I said, my voice as cold as steel, "is an audit of your activities while you held my power of attorney. An audit that shows you sold the beach house my wife as sanctuary for a fraction of its value in a cash deal." The color drained from his face. "That, I can explain. The market was..." "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't insult my intelligence. I know exactly what you did. You took the money and spent it, believing it was your inheritance. But you made a grave miscalculation." I slid a single document across the table. It was the deed to my main residence, the sprawling estate he grew up in. "You see, Daniel, that house is also in your mother's name, as is the company. As is everything of value I own, and according to the terms of her trust, which I am the sole executor of, any heir who acts in a manner that is deceitful or financially detrimental to the estate is automatically disinherited." His jaw dropped. He stared at the paper, then at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You can't. That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," I said quietly. "Your mother was a wise woman. She knew the poison of greed. We set this up to protect our legacy from the very thing you've become." I stood up. "The car you bought is being repossessed as we speak. The accounts you funneled the money into have been frozen. You are no longer a beneficiary of this family's estate. You are no longer my son." He just sat there, broken. The swagger, the arrogance, all of it gone, replaced by the pathetic, hollow look of a man who has lost everything because he valued nothing. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him and felt a deep, profound sadness. I turned and walked out of that office, leaving him with the silence and the truth. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't shouting, "I told you so." It's watching as the world they built on lies and betrayal collapses around them, and all you did was pull out a single, silent stone. He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. On the way back, I asked Clara to stop by the beach house. I just had to see it again, to feel that peace, and remember why I fought so hard to stay alive. But as we turned onto that familiar street, I froze. My house, my beautiful white house with the blue shutters, was gone. Well, not gone. Just changed. The porch I'd built with my own 2 hands was painted a stark, unforgiving black. The garden my wife had so lovingly planted was completely flattened, and the old wooden swing she adored vanished. In its place, a family I'd never seen before was laughing in the yard. Clara parked the car, her voice gentle. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, "maybe we should just go." But I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the home that was no longer mine, and I felt something inside me break. It wasn't just my heart, it was my faith. Later that night, when I confronted Daniel, he didn't even flinch. "Dad, you don't need that old place anymore," he said, swirling a glass of whiskey. "I sold it, got a good price, too. We can get something newer, more modern. You should thank me. Thank him for selling my memories, for erasing the sound of my wife's laughter from those walls. There's a specific kind of anger that comes from betrayal like that. It doesn't explode, it just simmers, waiting patiently to be served cold." I didn't say a word. Silence was my only answer. He took it as weakness. He smirked, patted my shoulder, and walked away, leaving me like a ghost in my own home. But he had no idea I was far from weak. I was watching, I was listening, and I was planning. In the days that followed, I started quietly gathering information. I called my lawyer, Mr. Bennett, a man I'd trust with my life. When I explained what happened, he was floored. "You gave him temporary power of attorney." "Yes," he confirmed, "but only for your medical and financial matters while you were incapacitated. Selling the property without your direct consent was completely illegal." My pulse hammered in my chest. "Can we reverse it?" I asked, my voice tight. He let out a long sigh. "Not easily. The sale is done. The money's been transferred. But there are other ways." Those 2 words, "other ways," echoed in my mind. Revenge doesn't always need to be loud or violent. Sometimes all it needs is patience and the right signature on the right piece of paper. That night, I sat in my study, looking at an old photograph of my wife, Emily. I whispered to her picture. "He sold our home, but he has no idea what I still have. He doesn't know what you and I built long before he ever came along. Because you see, before my surgery, before Daniel ever got a taste of what he thought was power, I had quietly moved my most significant asset, late wife's entire estate, the stocks, the trust funds to a private foundation under her name. The beach house was sentimental, yes, but the real fortune was something far, far greater. And now, my son was about to learn that the old man he dismissed as weak was much smarter than he ever gave me credit for. Right then, I made a vow. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't start a fight. I would let him bask in the illusion of his victory. And then, when he was at his absolute highest, I would take everything back. Slowly, silently. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone dig their own grave, one selfish act at a time. And so, I started watching him from the shadows. Weeks passed after that cold confrontation. As far as Daniel was concerned, everything was back to normal. He'd drop by my house occasionally, putting on a show of a caring son, always asking if I was doing better. And I played my part perfectly, the frail, harmless old man, grateful for his son's attention. But behind those polite, empty smiles, I was building something far stronger than my physical recovery. I was building my revenge, piece by piece. Daniel didn't seem to notice how much he was changing, or maybe he just didn't care. With the money from the beach house, he bought himself a brand new car, something flashy, loud, and completely out of character. He started throwing parties, surrounding himself with a new crowd of friends who only seemed to care about the depth of his wallet. He genuinely believed he had finally stepped out of my shadow. But the truth, he was walking straight into a trap I had set years ago. The greatest punishment for a greedy man is to give him exactly what he wants and then watch him choke on it. I had my lawyer, Mr. Bennett, start digging quietly. We traced every document from the sale, every signature, and every single bank transfer Daniel made. My lawyer was confident. "If you want to press charges, you can," he told me. "You'll win easily." But I just shook my head. No, jail was too simple. It was too merciful. I didn't want my son behind bars. I wanted him to live a long life and realize every single day what his betrayal truly cost him. So instead, I focused on my plan. Daniel was operating under the assumption that he would inherit everything that once I was gone. All that I had built would automatically become his. But I had rewritten my will years ago, right after Emily passed away. The real estate, the companies, the shares, everything had been moved into a private trust under her name. And that trust contained one very specific clause that Daniel knew nothing about. If he ever acted against the family's best interests, he would be permanently removed as a beneficiary. And the proof of his betrayal, it was sitting in a neat little file in my lawyer's office, signed, dated, and ready to be deployed. Sometimes, revenge doesn't require fire or fury. All it needs is a single document, waiting patiently for the perfect moment. Daniel's greed didn't stop at the house. Once he tasted power, he wanted more. He started asking questions about my company, suggesting I retire early. "Dad," he said one afternoon, "you've worked your whole life. Let me take over. You deserve rest." Rest. That's what he called it. The same kind of rest he gave my beach house. I smiled faintly and replied, "You're right, son. Maybe it's time." His eyes lit up like a predator smelling blood. That's when I knew the trap was working. Behind the scenes, I instructed my lawyer to begin transferring company control note to Daniel, but to the foundation. Publicly, I made it look like I was stepping down due to health issues. Daniel was thrilled. He began telling everyone he was the new CEO. He didn't know that every decision he made, every signature he forged, every dollar he wasted, was being documented, and all of it. Every reckless act would soon become evidence of his downfall. The easiest way to destroy a man full of arrogance is to let him believe he has already won. Clara, the nurse who had stood by me during my recovery, became my silent ally. She would visit me often, always pretending it was just routine care. In reality, she was my messenger, quietly delivering documents, updates, and photographs of Daniel's extravagant lifestyle. Every picture she showed me the new cars, the luxury trips, the late-night parties added another brick to the wall of my resolve. There was one picture that broke me, though. Daniel had taken his new friends to the beach, my beach near the house he sold. In that picture, he was standing where my wife's garden once bloomed, laughing, holding a glass of champagne. The people around him had no idea whose grave they were standing on, because that soil held the ashes of the woman who made me who I was. I turned away from that picture. For the first time in years, I felt tears roll down my face. But they weren't tears of weakness anymore. They were a feel. When pain turns into purpose, revenge becomes an art. I started preparing for my final act. I met with my lawyer and asked, "How long until the new legal transfers are complete?" 2 weeks, he said. "Once that's done, the entire estate, businesses, and assets will officially belong to the Emily Walker Foundation. Daniel will have no legal claim." "Good," I replied, "and when that day comes, I want him to hear it from me." In those 2 weeks, I played the role of the perfect doting fater. I invited him for dinner, asked about his business plans, even praised him for taking initiative. He was smug, confident, convinced that I'd finally accepted his dominance. He told me about his upcoming engagement to a woman I'd never met, someone half his age, clearly chasing his newfound money. I didn't warn him. I let him dig his own grave deeper. During one of those dinners, he said something that sealed his fate. "You know, Dad," he laughed, "you should thank me for selling that beach house. It was old, just like your ways. It's time to move on from the past." I smiled slowly, hiding the storm raging in my eyes. "You're right, son. The past should stay buried." He didn't know the past was about to Roseanne bury him instead. When the day finally came, I called him to my office. I asked him to bring his lawyer, and he arrived looking proud, certain I was finally handing everything over. He sat across from me, tapping his fingers impatiently on the polished mahogany. "So," he said, a triumphant smirk on his face, "you're ready to sign the transfer?" I nodded and slid a folder across the table. "Already done," I said, "but I want you to read it first." He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages. expecting to see his name on the ownership papers. Instead, he found the legal documents transferring all my assets to every company, every account, every property into the Emily Walker Foundation. His name wasn't on a single page. His face went pale. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, his voice cracking. "It's your mother's legacy," I said quietly, my voice steady. "You sold our home. You sold her memories. So now, you get nothing, not even our name." He laughed, a bitter, desperate sound. "You can't do this to me," he yelled. "Oh, I already have," I said, leaning back calmly in my chair. "You see, Daniel, I'm not the weak old man you thought you could manipulate. I built everything you tried to destroy, and now I'm taking it all back." He stormed out of the office, shouting threats, but I didn't move. I'd waited too long for this moment. Watching him lose everything, without me even lifting a finger, was the most peaceful revenge I could have ever imagined. Some victories are silent, just a heartbeat slowing down as justice finally breathes. But the story wasn't over yet, because revenge, like Teitida, always returns stronger. And I knew Daniel, a man like him, wouldn't disappear quietly. No, this was only the calm before the final storm. The day Daniel lost everything, I expected him to lash out, and he did. But what I didn't expect was how fast his world would crumble after that. It was almost poetic, the way his empire of lies began to rot from the inside out. At first, he tried to fight back. He went to my lawyer, yelling, threatening lawsuits. He claimed I was senile, that I'd been manipulated. But Benetcom was ever simply handed him the signed medical reports, proving I was of sound mind when I transferred everything. Every signature was clean. Every clause was legal. Daniel had no chance. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments below. The louder a guilty man screams, the clearer the truth becomes. The day Daniel stormed out of my lawyer's office, red-faced and humiliated, was just the beginning. Within weeks, his so-called friends, the same ones who toasted his new fortune, suddenly stopped answering his calls. His girlfriend, the one he boasted he'd marry, vanished, taking his last bit of cash with her. I didn't have to do a thing. Life itself was serving my revenge on a silver platter. Daniel had always been arrogant, but without money, his arrogance curdled into desperation. He sold his car, then his expensive watch, then the designer clothes he once wore to mock my simple tastes. I heard from an old employee that he was spotted at a bar, begging for money. Hearing this, I didn't smile or gloat. I just sat in my study, in my new house, on a private cliff, staring out at the ocean. The sound of the waves reminded me of my late wife's laughter. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt at peace. True revenge doesn't need an audience. It only needs a silence loud enough to echo in the heart of the guilty. But that peace was short-lived. One evening, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Daniel. He was broken, thinner, and looked years older. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the very living room where he'd once demanded control, but now he looked like a lost, ashamed stranger. "I made a mistake," he began. "I was stupid. I thought you'd be proud if I took initiative." I said nothing. I just poured him a glass of water and set it on the table. He didn't touch it. "Please," he continued, his voice cracking. "I have nothing left. They all used me. I thought money would make me strong, but it just made me blind. I want to start over." For a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered the garden my wife, Emily, had poured her heart into, the one he bulldozed for a quick profit. My pity hardened into steel. Forgiveness is easy for a small wound, but betrayal leaves scars that never stop bleeding. "I gave you everything, Daniel," I said slowly, my voice calm. "Everything I built for you. And you sold it all, not because you needed money, but because you wanted power. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." He bowed his head. "I know," he whispered, "and I've paid for it." I leaned back, studying him. Not yet, I replied. He looked up, confusion clouding his eyes. What do you mean? I stood and walked to the window, pointing toward the horizon. You see that ocean? That's where your mother's ashes rest. It's where she wanted her peace. And while I was fighting for my life, you turned her memory into a transaction. Shane flooded his face. You didn't just betray me, Daniel. You betrayed her. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I didn't mean to. I cut him off coldly. But you did, and intentions don't erase consequences. He collapsed into the chair, covering his face with his hands, sobbing quietly. He wasn't my son anymore. He was just another man crushed by the weight of his own greed. Sometimes, life's greatest punishment isn't loss, it's the inescapable truth. After a long silence, he whispered, "Can I at least work for you again? I'll start from the bottom. I'll earn your trust." I turned to face him, my expression unyielding. "You can work," I said, "but not for me. You'll work for the foundation, your mother's foundation. You'll clean the offices, organize the archives, handle the mail. Minimum wage. No title. No authority." He stared at me in disbelief. "You want me to be a janitor?" I simply nodded. "Consider it redemption. If you want to understand the value of what you lost, you need to start by earning it." His pride burned in his eyes, but he just nodded slowly. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. When he left that day, I didn't feel joy. Revenge isn't about joy. It's about balance. It's about setting the scales of justice right again. Over the following months, Daniel worked in silence. He showed up early and left late, never complaining. I watched from a distance. The staff knew who he was, but treated him like any other employee. I saw him sweeping floors, sorting files, eating lunch alone. Slowly, the arrogance melted from his face. Once pride is stripped away, the soul finally has a chance to breathe. One afternoon, my assistant Clara visited. "He's changing," she said softly. "Maybe this is the lesson he needed all along." I looked out at the sun setting over the ocean. "Maybe," I said. "But some lessons come with a price you never stop paying." A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter. The script was shaky, but the words were sincere. It was from Daniel. That it read, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed something I can never rebuild. But thank you for giving me the chance to face myself. Every day I work there, I see Mom's name, and it reminds me of who I was before greed took over. I don't expect your love back, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, right beside a photo of my wife. I didn't cry, but I did smile, not because I had forgiven him, but because the cycle was complete. The sweetest revenge isn't watching your enemy fall. It's watching them rebuild what they destroyed, one humble, painful step at a time. From that day on, I never brought up the beach house again. I didn't need to. The ocean still whispered Emily's name, and Daniel, working in her foundation, was reminded of it every single day. He had sold my memories for money, but I made sure those memories became his burden, his daily prayer for redemption. And in that, I found a strange kind of peace. Time has a funny way of changing people. It doesn't erase the past. It just gives you new eyes to see it. Months passé, then a full year. I watched Daniel from a distance, never interfering, never softening too quickly. He worked at the foundation like a man paying for his sins, not with words, but with pure effort. The man who once threw lavish parties in my beach house now spent his mornings cleaning the very halls that carried his mother's name. And maybe, in some small way, that was justice enough. I'd see him sometimes, from my office window, head down, sleeves rolled up, quietly helping the staff. He didn't know I watched. I didn't want him to. I wanted him to work for something real this time, not for power, not for inheritance, but for peace. True redemption isn't something you ask for. It's earned in silence, when no one is watching. Clara, always loyal and kind, kept me informed. "He's different now," she'd say with a faint smile. "Doesn't talk much. Doesn't complain. He's..." Humble-eyed, just nod. pretending to be indifferent. But deep down, a small ember of hope began to flicker. Maybe my son, the same man who sold his family as soul for money, was finally learning what it meant to have one. It was around that time I began feeling the weight of my age. My heart wasn't as strong as it used to be, though the doctors said I was stable. Still, I knew my time was catching up. I spent most evenings sitting by the ocean, listening to the waves crash against the rocks, the same way Emily used to. It reminded me of a voice calm, endless, and so forgiving. And then one day, she came back to me, not in flesh, but in a memory so vivid it felt real. It was late afternoon. I'd fallen asleep in my chair when I dreamed of the beach house. Again the old white porch, the sound of laughter, the smell of salt and roses. Emily stood there, smiling like she always did, and said softly, "You've done enough, Michael. Let go." When I woke up, I knew exactly what she meant. Revenge gives peace to the mind, but forgiveness gives rest to the soul. That night, I asked Clara to call Daniel. "Tell him I want to see him tomorrow," I said. She didn't question it. She just nodded, her eyes shining, as if she already knew what I was going to do. The next morning, Daniel came, hesitant but calm. He looked different, wiser, maybe even gentler. He stood at the door until I waved him in. "Sit down, son," I said. He obeyed, just like he did when he was a boy. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The air between us was heavy, filled with all the things we'd never said. Finally, I broke the silence. "You've been working at the foundation for over a year now," I said slowly. "Clara tells me you've been doing well." He nodded, his voice low. "I'm trying to, Dad. It's the only thing that feels right anymore." I studied him not as the man who had betrayed me, but as a son who was learning to rebuild himself. "Do you know why I made you work there?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "To punish me." I shook my head. "No, to remind you." He frowned slightly. "Remind me of what?" "Of your mother," I said quietly. "Of who she was, what she believed in. She built that foundation with love, not money. I wanted you to see that love can't be bought, traded, or sold, not even for a house by the sea." Tears glistened in his eyes. "I know that now. I was blinded by greed. I thought success meant control, but I see now that it means service." I smiled faintly. "Good, because that is what she wanted and what I always hoped you'd learn before it was too late." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "Is it too late, Dad?" I looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time in years, I saw not the man who betrayed me, but the boy I used to teach how to fish, how to hammer nails into wood, how to dream. "No, son," I said softly. "It's never too late, not if you're still willing to make things right. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't erase the wound. It simply teaches you how to live with the scar." I reached into my drawer and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a single key-old, worn, with a tiny blue tag attached. I slid it across the table. He looked confused. "What's this?" "It's the key to the beach house," I said quietly. His eyes widened. "But you said it was sold." I smiled. "It was, but not for long. I bought it back months ago through the foundation. It's under your mother's name now. No one knew but me." He stared at the key like it was a miracle. "You bought it back?" "Yes," I said, "because that house was never meant to be lost. It's where our family began, and where I wanted to heal." He shook his head slowly, tears streaming down his face. "Why would you give it to me after everything I did?" "Because revenge has run its course," I said softly. "And now, what's left is legacy. I don't want my final years to end in bitterness. I want them to end in peace, your mother's peace." He dropped to his knees beside me, crying like a child. "I'm sorry, Dad. I swear, I'll never let you down again." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't swear. Just live better. Let the foundation grow. Keep her memory alive. That's how you make it right. The real revenge. ISNT. taking everything away it. S. Showing someone what they could be at, if they'd only chosen love from the start. From that day forward, things changed. Daniel continued to work, not out of guilt, but out of purpose. He helped expand the foundation, opened new programs in his mother's name, and rebuilt the beach house exactly as it used to be. Every wall, every porch beam, every flower. He'd often invite me there on weekends. I'd sit on the rebuilt swing, watching the sunset, while he worked in the garden, planting the same roses his mother once tended. One evening, as we watched the waves together, he said quietly, "You were right, Dad. The house wasn't the real fortune." I looked at him and smiled. "No, son. It never was. The real fortune was knowing when to start over." The wind carried the scent of roses and salt that night tanned for a moment. I could almost hear Emily laughing. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We did it." He's home again. In the end, revenge gave me justice, but forgiveness gave me peace. And as the tide rolled in under the fading sun, I realized something profound. Revenge may feed the pain, but it is forgiveness that truly frees the soul. I had spent years building an empire, but the greatest thing I ever rebuilt was my son. The man who once sold my memories had now become their guardian. And maybe, just maybe, that was the ending Emily had wanted all along. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.